Would it be considered ironic that the temporary tag on the F-150 that I traded my Ram 1500 in for would be expiring on April 26th? 426, Hemi Day. What? How's that for an intro? Creepy. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about this F-150. I want to give you guys some initial impressions. Now, of course, I haven't done a full video on this truck yet, but I am kind of getting to know this thing just a little bit. And, well, let's go into the modifications first. I've got the Ford Racing Performance Parts shackles on the way. We're going to bring the back end of this truck down about an inch and a half to level it out, make it look a little bit better, probably handle a little bit better, and well, if nothing else, it'll make getting stuff out of the back of this truck a lot easier. Also on the way, an exhaust. And as you may imagine, this is what I've been pining over for the longest, but we're gonna go with a MagnaFlow exhaust. It's gonna sound amazing with this Coyote V8. And of course, if you got a truck and it's got a V8, how you keep it stock is beyond me. But we're gonna go with this setup. I think it's gonna look fantastic, and it allows me to keep the rear spare tire, the spare tire rather, underneath the bed, I should say, as opposed to it being just thrown into the bed, because some of those exhaust systems, yeah, you got to take out the spare, which is not an option. Besides, I think this is going to look good and sound amazing. But what I also wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about is some of the issues. I don't really want to say issues, just the differences. It's like a cultural difference, I guess, between Ford and Ram. If you've never driven a Ford or spent a whole lot of time with one, some of this may be a bit foreign, especially if you're coming from Ram. And where I'm going with is this. It's kind of weird being a car guy or somebody that's into performance and owning an F-150. And the reason why I say that is it's kind of a play a little bit between having the best V8 that you can get, easily the most powerful, and well, at least of the most common V8s, but having a gauge cluster and a dash layout that has no real gauges in it. You know, car guys like to keep up with temperatures of practically anything that you can take a temperature of, fluids primarily being the key thing here. But with the Dodge, you just get a bunch of sort of gauges. I mean, they have the little sweepy things, but no numbers. You don't get a voltmeter, and well, quite frankly, you don't get much of anything in terms of dash layout. You don't get any skins, which is to say that you can change the appearance and things like that. It's extremely limited with the F-150, at least in the XLT trim. The Rams, on the other hand, have got a plethora of all kinds of different gauges. They've got actual numeric gauges, voltmeters, and everything else under the sun. And it seems to be a lot more intuitive. If you're a car guy and that kind of information just kind of satisfies, more or less like scratches an itch for you, the Ram is going to be better in that respect, with the Ford being a much better performer in terms of just acceleration, and at least in my experience, fuel economy already has shown to be a significant improvement with this truck behind me. But it just kind of lacks a little bit of that, I don't know, that car guy feel that you get with the Ram. So at least in learning and kind of working through some of the quirks of the Ford versus the Ram, this is sort of a documentary of my journey, if you will, going from Ram and Mopar guy into kind of creeping back into that whole Ford thing. What I have noticed, though, is that Ford does offer a lot of, I guess, aftermarket, even though it's the parent company of the truck. That's the OEM, if you will, the original equipment manufacturer, makes hot rod parts for these things. I'm not really getting too deep into that just yet, but what I do want to emphasize here is that Ford is at least a company that, although the interior of the truck and the mindset behind all of that, like without the gauges and the skins and stuff like that, they do at least offer performance parts for their trucks. And in some cases, pretty significant margins, superchargers and suspension bits and stuff like that you just don't see in other areas. So, but you know, I got to thinking about it a little bit too. When you're looking at the Ram with all of the really good gauges that they have, and the lack of that with the Ford, does it really matter if you know what these numbers are? I've had to kind of go through this a little bit in my head, and I got to thinking, what would I do with the information? Like, what do I need to know the voltage of the battery for? Although, fun fact, playing with this thing and having it on for as long and going through all the infotainment system that this truck has, I've actually drained the battery on this truck, not once, but twice. Mainly because I keep forgetting to turn the lights off. The lights, everything just kind of comes on in this thing. But anyway, just some behind the scenes for you. But does it really matter that you don't have the extensive gauges that you do with the Dodge? I mean, if something's going to go wrong with the Dodge, just because you know what the number is doesn't mean you can do anything about it, at least not in the immediate sense. And well, I mean, at least with the Ford, you get the sweepy things that tell you kind of where the temperature is. And if something's wrong with the battery, you'll know pretty quick anyway. So I guess for me, it's just kind of learning the truck. But I am finding myself gravitating more towards the driving experience now with the Ford than I did with the Dodge. Remember that the Dodge is still, in my opinion, the best handling, or if nothing else, the best riding truck out of the group. But with that being said, this Ford is not half bad. And when you take into account the performance envelope of this Coyote V8, it's kind of an addictive driving experience. Again, if you're into sports cars or stuff that accelerates hard and sounds really good, it's extremely difficult to beat the Ford. And keep in mind, I'm just getting out of a Ram. I still have Buffy, my 2017 Ram 1500 that I drive every day for work, that's coming up on 200,000 miles pretty soon. So the durability with one Ram didn't really bleed into the durability of another. And of course, it's two completely different Rams. So at least I still have a Ram to compare this Ford to. And I can tell you that as different as they are, you can't really necessarily go wrong with whichever direction you choose to go, provided that you don't run into some of the same issues I've run into. You'll have a fantastic ownership experience. But again, coming from Ram and getting into a Ford, I have to say that there are some things that I'm still trying to get used to a little bit, but given the build quality, or at least the initial solidness of this Ford versus that Ram, I'm finding myself really warming up more to this Ford in a way that I didn't quite think I would. I initially got it because it is really it's kind of more of a luxury vehicle for me than an actual utility vehicle, the way that Buffy, my 2017 Ram, is. But again, the more I'm driving it, the more I'm appreciating the performance of the Coyote engine. And keep in mind, this truck's got 331 gears, not 373s. It's still a stronger performer than even my DT Ram was with a tune and 355 gears. I still need to quantify that. Draggy videos maybe in the future? Anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and turn you loose, but with that bit of info, post up your comments, let me know what you think, and what's your experience been? I'd love to hear about it. With that, that is a wrap. Adios.